A
Now
sneak peek of what's coming up next.
We're assuming that we know. That's the purpose of the room is for people who have that sensory issue.
But I think that's part of the reason why some of the accommodations that are set up now, some of the rules, some of the policies, some of the regulations that are set up now, I think that's why a lot of them don't actually do anything.
So
is
do you
because
think
of what you just said.
Do you think that blind
people assume?
Do you think the blind people should be allowed to have service animals in restaurants?
Do I believe blind people should be?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we do. We allow that, and we don't allow other people to do it. Why can't I bring a service animal into a restaurant?
Because you don't have a service animal.
Right, because I don't need one. So and somebody who doesn't have sensory issues doesn't need a sensory room. We are recording.
Welcome to On the Spectrum podcast. My name is Nick.
Really?
Yeah,
that's okay. Steve.
Yes, because Steve. That's how I do it, Steve.
Welcome.
Yes, that's what I do. You have your way of doing things. I have mine. I don't know why you got to pick on it.
Welcome to the Thunderdome.
Yes, absolutely. I'm like a weird radio talk show host, okay? Although we're doing a podcast. But thank you for joining us for another thrilling, amazing, exciting episode of On the Spectrum podcast. As I usually say, me and Steve do not presume to be experts in anything whatsoever. We just have opinions. If we're wrong, so be it. In fact, if we are wrong, if we are right, if you have a difference of opinion of anything you hear in the episode, please comment, message, email, whatever you feel like doing. Let us know, because feedback is the only way we're going to learn, and it's the only way we can have a conversation and move it forward. So, Steve, what are we going to talk about today?
So I had a couple of thought experiments running through my head.
Yes.
And so these are not things I fully thought through. These are things I am thinking through at the moment.
But we're going to talk them through now.
So we've talked before about the workplace and about how it can be difficult. We talked about it with Temple. We talked about it ourselves.
And with Shay.
And with Shay, navigating the work environment is difficult for a lot of neurodivergent folk. Not just autistic people, but neurodivergent folk in general. So it got me thinking, like, yes, we ask for accommodations, or we can try to. There are certain things we do to try to accommodate ourselves and ask for from the business or business, whatever, wherever you work.
Yeah.
However, maybe I was thinking about this the wrong way. So theoretically, and the question I posed to you, what would it be like if there was a business run by neurodivergent folk? So instead of always trying to work for other people and fit a square peg into a round hole,
potentially,
we had other people who were like us, or maybe who would make more accommodations. So it might not necessarily be like a business owner. Let's say I'm Nick and I have Nick's Autistic Warehouse.
Yeah.
But if I had maybe a co-op or something.
It's the most well-organized warehouse ever.
Maybe it's a few people who are neurodivergent start a business, or a co-op where everybody who works there is part owner, something like that.
Like if we ever started a coffee shop.
Yeah, although I don't know how a coffee shop would work as a co-op. I think co-ops work better as...
No, I hear what you're saying. What I'm saying is as an example of like a business to own. If me and you ran a business.
Right. I think I don't think co-ops are a horrible idea. Like some co-ops there's successful co-ops in the world. It's just a different way to run a business, right?
Right.
But I think co-ops, in my opinion, only work in certain types of businesses. I think certain types of businesses would be much harder, not impossible, but much harder to do as a co-op.
Right.
If every single employee is part owner. Okay. I think if you ran a coffee shop as a co-op, that would be very difficult.
Okay.
Because places like coffee shops tend to have like higher turnover.
Yeah.
There's a low skill ceiling for like what you need to do in a coffee shop.
Right. So back to your thought experiment.
Yeah. The thought experiment is, what would it be like to work for a business where the owners, or if it's a co-op where everybody's neurodivergent, and you make accommodations for each other, or you cycle through employees as needed, to make sure that the business runs well and that everything that needs to get done gets done. So if somebody needs a break, give them a break.
Right.
Maybe you have people, there are companies nowadays that have unlimited leave.
Yes.
So let's say Nick needs 2 weeks off. I bring in somebody who is just on leave or whatever, and we cover each other and keep the business running.
Right. We basically attempt to retain employment at all costs.
And the idea is that rather than trying to force us to accommodate to everybody else, we accommodate each other.
Yes. So to kind of sum it up, you're basically talking about a ND owner, a
Yep.
neurodivergent owner, only hiring neurodivergent people.
Or a co-op, yep.
Sure. I'm sticking to the other business model opposed to the co-op idea, because you're going to have to explain the co-op idea to me, but I don't need you to for right now for the thought experiment. So it's an ND owner.
Yep.
Or grouping of people all owning together. Co-op, right? Co-op.
Yep.
Okay. And only having ND employees.
Yeah.
Neurodivergent employees. And so based on that, how would that function? How would that work? And you're basically saying, is it better or worse than what we have now?
Yes.
That's what the thought experiment is?
Like, how would it work? How would it work? And would that be better for us?
So the first thing I said when you proposed this to me was, I think there's pros and cons. There's good and bad to this. Yeah, I can see a lot of good stuff out of it, but I can also see some downside to it. And one of the first things I thought of as a downside is we're excluding people who are non-neurodivergent.
Yeah.
Just like they currently exclude some of us now.
No, but I don't think this is the same thing. Because
I think it's very similar in that way, because we're saying that because you operate differently than what we want you to or how we want you to, we're not going to let you in. I think it works out to being roughly the same idea, but I don't think that would happen drastically. But I also think that having somebody who is NT, a neurotypical, I think that also allows for a different way of thinking, because and like I said before, if we're just talking about autism, not talking about like ADHD or anything like that, just talking about autism, we know full well autistic folk think a little bit differently than the NTs. We communicate slightly differently than NTs, at least a large bulk of us do. And so in that regard, I think it would be worthwhile to have NTs around too.
It would depend on a few different things.
It
would depend on what type of business you're running.
Yeah. Yes.
And
there's a lot of factors to this.
You could still have like maybe a few who are not, but I don't think you need them. And I don't think there's a problem with discriminating in that way. Just like
discrimination in some ways, okay?
Yes, we discriminate. Like the whole concept of affirmative action is discrimination. You're discriminating in favor of certain people over other people because of historical injustices.
Right, because we're trying to correct the leg down we created to them.
Right, and I'm not saying that this is the same exact thing, but I'm using it as an example of discrimination.
No, and I get you. It's a similar concept there in a way.
So we're creating a space. It's like if I were to, so not all discrimination is bad. Like we discriminate all the time for different reasons. It just means you're drawing a line in saying, like, if I create a business that is for, I don't know, if I make, I'm trying to think of a good example.
No, I know, but that's kind of why I'm reacting that way. No, there's because you're trying to come up with a way to make discrimination
I have some examples, but the examples I had in my head weren't good enough, so I was trying to think of a better one.
Okay,
but like I was going to say, like if you make products for handicact people. Whether it be somebody missing a leg or somebody in a wheelchair,
right? Physical handicaps or disabilities,
right. Or like if let's say there's a group that, let's say a bunch of dwarf actors come together and they create a
little people actors.
They're called dwarfs.
I'm just saying some prefer only being called little people.
Well, dwarf is the medical term.
I know it is, but some still prefer just being.
Okay, whatever.
Anyway,
little people
moving on.
Come together.
Yeah.
And they create a group that's only for little people. They're discriminating against people who aren't little.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. If you have a black college or a black only whatever, and you say we're only going to do this, I think that I don't see the problem with discriminating against people who are not ND if we decide to run our business that way. Being neurotypical is not a protected class, so I'm pretty sure you can discriminate against people who are not neurodivergent.
But that's just it, though. Like, you cannot discriminate against somebody because they're white, because race is a protected class.
You're not discriminating against them. You're discriminating in favor of someone else.
So in some regards, I agree with you because like having a little person owned, operated, and run business and no, we will not hire people who are not. I agree with that idea, that level or that type of discrimination, because you're actually allowing someone else to now get on equal footing, right? Same thing with, to a degree and to a scale, African-American or Black-owned business only hiring Black people. Like, I don't have a problem with that until they become a nationwide company. And then I start to have a little bit of a problem, not drastic problem with it, but a little bit, because there are areas of this country where everybody needs to get a job.
Technically, you can't only hire, you can't discriminate against somebody for being white, even though.
Right. I mean, because that's a protected class. Race is a protected class. But like little people,
but I'm saying
it's considered a disability. Same thing with ND is considered a disability. So no neurotypical is not a protected class. We make decisions
all the time as a society to discriminate one way or the other in favor or against people.
Because humans are flawed in that way.
Right. But I'm saying that discrimination isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes we discriminate because we're trying to help a certain group of people.
Well,
but I always try to. What if we have a sensory room inside a school?
Yeah.
And we say the sensory room is for people who have sensory issues. Would it be unreasonable to say that people who don't have sensory issues should not go into the sensory room?
So who's to say who does and does not have sensory issues?
That's not what I'm saying.
I am saying it that way because that's the problem that comes out of you can only use it if you have sensory issues. So
I know, but that's irrelevant to my point.
It's not irrelevant to the reality of that.
Yes, but you're being pedantic because
no, I'm trying to be realistic about it.
No, I know what you're saying, Nick, but you're looking at the minutia of it, and I'm not talking about the details. I'm talking about the general idea of having a space that's for a certain type of people. Who cares about who determines who that person is? I'm not talking about that part of it.
But see, I think this is relevant to what we're talking about when it comes to this business idea. I think we need to look at the minutia of it. I think we need to stop writing that shit off.
Yes, but you need to stop with the autism for a second. You're getting.
I can't stop with the autism, Steve. I am autistic.
You're getting too far into the details where I'm trying to talk about. You have to look at it from the larger picture first before you get into the details.
So I think far too many people don't go far enough to the details.
Yes, we can, but I'm saying the first part is looking at it for the bigger picture.
We got the bigger picture. It's okay to say no to one person to benefit somebody else. That's the initial argument, right?
Yes.
That's the simplest terms to make that. That's the big picture.
Because the whole purpose of creating a company for neurodiverse people
is to help neurodiverse people. I got it.
Neurodivergent people is to create a space that is more conducive to them and to make a space that's more accommodating to them. And if you start bringing in lots of neurotypical people, then what is to differentiate it between any other business?
See, but that's the other thing too is, and here's one of those detail pieces, I didn't say bring in a lot. I said some. So I said not to exclude them. I'm not saying let's bring in a crap ton just to make sure we get our day done, right? To make sure we're productive and profitable. What I'm saying with it is to exclude any mental difference, I think would be a disservice to us. Because for one, some of the people who we're hiring who are ND, they may actually need help with socialization a little bit more. They might need communication help. And I'm not saying we hire the NT just to help them with that communication, but being around and working with somebody who's an NT.
I will concede to you, we will hire one neurotypical person and their position is
affirmative action for NTs.
No, it's the company whipping boy. So anytime something goes wrong, we flog the NT person.
We flog the NT.
We have them hung up. Was strapped up to a pole and we just whip them.
I mean, our people have tendency to be scapegoats for when shit goes wrong at places a lot.
So we'll just blame the MT.
Yeah, we're going
to hire you. You get a paycheck. You don't have to actually do anything.
Nothing at all.
You just have to take the blame for everything that goes wrong.
Yes, you have to be blamed for everything.
And allow the autistic guy in accounting to whip you once in a while.
Yes, that's let the let the autistic guy in accounting.
Yep. His name's Larry. He's good with numbers, not so good with people.
The accountant. Of all people, the accountant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Larry,
okay.
the accountant.
Not the CFO.
No.
No. Not the person who works the front counter. No.
Yeah.
It's the accountant.
As long as you take that beating, we will continue to give you a paycheck.
Yep.
So
Yep. Well, are we going to pay them appropriately?
it depends what you mean by appropriate.
I mean, a living wage.
What is a living wage? See, I can be pedantic too.
Well, no. But like, I think the current.
What is a living wage, Nick?
Well, no, I think so for one, I've never been pedantic purely to be difficult. I was being pedantic because I believe in the details. So like there is a difference in the two things we just did.
Right. So
one is about being difficult.
Here's the thing.
So,
I was
hold
saying,
on.
assuming that you could, okay, because people, this is the way most people think.
Sure, that's how most people think. You would know how most people think.
If you have a room where people can or can't go in based on the criteria, the thought experiment or the supposition, right, is that you would be able to. So we're assuming that all things considered equal, we know who is and who isn't, like who has a sensory issue, who doesn't. Now you're saying, well, how do we know who? Well, that we're assuming that we know. That's the purpose of the room is for people who have that sensory issue.
But I think that's part of the reason why some of the accommodations that are set up now, some of the rules, some of the policies, some of the regulations that are set up now, I think that's why a lot of them don't actually do anything.
So
is
do you
because
think
of what you just said.
Do you think that blind
people assume?
Do you think that blind people should be allowed to have service animals in restaurants?
Do I believe blind people should be?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we do. We allow that, and we don't allow other people to do it. Why can't I bring a service animal into a restaurant?
Because you don't have a service animal.
Right, because I don't need one. So and somebody who doesn't have sensory issues doesn't need a sensory room.
So name somebody on the planet who doesn't potentially have sensory issues. Because even NTs can have sensory issues.
There is a difference between people who are autistic and have sensory issues versus somebody having a sensory issue who's not autistic,
But help me understand that, because sensory issues are sensory issues, all things being equal.
Yes, but most people aren't going to have the sensory issue to the extent that an autistic person would have it.
So I think
not as frequently.
I think that part is absolutely true. Probably not as frequently, but people who suffer from migraines, that's a medical diagnosis, and they would have sensory issues at times. So can they use the room?
Possibly.
But they're NTs, and yet they have.
I didn't say anything about being neurodivergent to be in the room. I said sensory issues.
Right, sensory issues. But that's just it, though. Like, you
someone smarter than me would figure out the criteria.
But that's part of. So, like, to me, that's part of the downside to some of the conversations.
You always have to have
these
somebody
things.
making decisions, Nick. Somebody's going to have to say you can come in or you can't.
And that's part of.
Just like we make a decision saying like somebody can have a service animal and some people can't.
Well, we actually are able to identify certain things for service animals. And
what about
in fact, the criteria for it.
People have service animals who have PTSD.
No, those are emotional support animals, and those are not considered service animals. According to the ADA, emotional support animals do not have the same consideration as service animals.
We still give people with PTSD, they have animals. We're allowed to bring them in certain areas that other people aren't. You cannot
go into a business with an emotional support animal. The ADA does not cover that.
It doesn't matter.
It does actually, because
once again you're arguing about something that's not important.
No, to you it's not important. To me, it's actually very important. The details and the differentiating on some of these things.
The point is that some people are allowed to have animals and other people aren't.
But see.
Because they have a reason for having them.
But it's not that simple, though, because if you were a business who supports emotional support animals, you will let somebody in. But some people might not understand that your specific business is letting that happen. And then when they go into another business, they're like, well, that place let me do it. Because they're thinking like you do. Well, this place did, so this place did. That's a business. That's a business.
No, I mean, if they have the rights and I'll let them in, that's irrelevant. The point is that we make exceptions for certain people for certain reasons.
But it's not an exception. We're allowing somebody to function in our society at the same rate. We're actually equalizing things by allowing somebody who is blind to have a service animal.
Right.
Same thing with me wearing glasses. It's an accommodation we make. But when it comes to sensory issues, there are so many reasons why somebody would have a sensory issue. There is actually no way to say
you're
somebody
saying
can't.
That NT people have similar sensory issues to autistic people.
I'm
I just
saying
want you to go on
that-
record saying that.
Well, but it's not that simple. It's not that simple.
you're
And
saying
that's
that-
part of my point is every time you go to simplify any one of these things in this conversation, when it comes to accommodations, when it comes to any of this, I think you yourself are doing not only a disservice to you because of the way you're thinking about it, but I also think we're doing a disservice to the conversation about this because we're trying to simplify things.
Because that's the only way we
should
can
not be
talk
simple.
about these things. If you're talking about it in this type of setting, that's the only way you can talk about it, because you can't account for every single variable when you're talking about it in a theoretical conversation.
But we don't need to be on both
you
sides
can only
of
talk
that.
about it from like a 30,000 foot view, because we don't.
How about a 15,000 foot view then?
Because you can't get into every. Of course, there's going to be. You can think of problems or things that can get in the way for anything.
Right, but why don't we talk about the ones that are more common than not? Let's talk about the details we can think of in this given moment, opposed to dismissing all of them.
I'm not dismissing all of them.
Well,
I'm saying that
you're trying to simplify
you're
everything
saying
down
that some
to
people who are not neurodivergent or who don't normally have sensory issues might have a sensory issue.
Yes.
So to that, I would say if you have these rooms do exist. I don't know how schools make the determination
I don't either.
as to who can go in and who can't. Maybe just everybody's allowed. But
Maybe.
I would assume that would be up to the school or whoever's in charge of the room to determine who can go in and who can't.
Right.
So that's my answer is let them figure it out.
But see,
if they say, hey, I know that Billy has migraines. He has a slip from the doctor.
Right.
He takes a pill for his migraines.
Right.
I'm going to let him in the sensory room because I'm a human being and I see the situation and I'm allowing it.
Right.
Unfortunately, sometimes people who are involved in the situation have to make judgment calls based on things. You may be dealing with a kid who's undiagnosed but has sensory issues.
Right.
But because I'm a human being who understands what's going on and sees this, I allow them into the room because I'm making a judgment call because I see what's going on.
But what you just said, somebody taking into consideration all the variables, right? All the details, all the little things about
I'm
it.
talking about big picture, not the details.
Well, I understand that. It's just I think that's part of the disservice that people are doing, even when it comes to accommodations for NDs in the workplace now, is because people want to say, well, big picture. Well, a lot of the times when I'm hearing people say that, what they're saying is they don't give a rat's ass
the
about
problem is, Nick,
what's actually important.
You can't legislate every single variable. That's
but I'm not talking about.
It's kind of like
at what point did we start talking about legislation here?
We've argued before about like the fact that judges and law enforcement in general is allowed to make certain judgments on things,
right?
Which is not always ideal, but unfortunately, there's not really a better way to handle it because we can't account for every single variable, every situation. So the laws and the rules we have in place are just guidelines. Yeah. I mean, there's some things that are pretty set in stone, like you can't kill somebody. But I'm saying like
there's no reason to kill.
But there's a lot of gray area in certain areas because it's a lot of times the situation, the context actually matters. Right. So the context matters, which is why people are allowed to make judgment calls based on the context.
But that's what I'm trying to say about this. You kept calling it minutia or details, but I'm talking about the context of it. And so getting back to our premise here, even though we are actually talking about it the whole time, I think this to me is one of the reasons why things like this are so hard, why accommodations for people are so hard, is because people want to say
you can't cover every single thing.
But an employer can.
No, like if the ADA writes something, right? The ADA can't cover every single thing.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the ADA. Your thought experiment is not about the ADA.
Why do companies make accommodations? Because of the ADA.
No, because somebody in that business decided they didn't want to give a fuck about another human being.
No, I'm saying why do they make accommodations?
Because they're forced to. Why did they have to be forced to? Because human beings are shitty to one another.
Right, but what I'm saying is the ADA can't cover every single situation. But they have a very general guidelines, and it's actually the laws are vague. It says you have to provide an accommodation unless you can basically provide a reason why it would be an undue hardship for the business.
So for instance, that right there, because that opens the business up too. If I can justify it, then I can fuck you over.
It depends on what but I'm not saying that they couldn't be more specific.
Right.
But I'm saying there's a limit to how specific they can be because you can't cover every single situation.
But that's just it. It's not cover all or cover none. I'm saying, why don't we look at covering the common things or the most probable things?
Well, they do have specific So you know about like legal precedent, right?
Yes, I do.
So there are certain things that are expected because it's legal precedent, which means like if a company, even though the laws has been determined by courts to be interpreted this way,
Right.
meaning that if a company doesn't provide X accommodation, it doesn't matter. The law doesn't specifically say you have to provide a wheelchair ramp, but we've determined that you have to do it. So therefore, if you don't, you're going to be screwed for it. You're going to be fucked for it.
But that's just it. When we're talking physical disability, nobody argues about doing those accommodations.
Like allowing somebody who's autistic to wear headphones at work. Like, how could you argue that that's a detriment to the business?
And yet there are businesses who have.
Maybe. I don't know of any. I'm sure. I doubt you know any.
So that means it doesn't happen? Because you don't know about it and because I haven't heard of it?
Because you're saying that they have.
I'm betting money. If we Google it, there's going to be a fucking business that has won that.
Yeah. I doubt that, but I would doubt that. But anyway, the point is,
I also assume whether they've won it or not, there has been an employee who has claimed that they have.
So you think that it would be?
That is the loudest vehicle I've ever heard. It went through my headphones and like, holy shit.
We picked up a car outside and I have soundproofing all in this room. So
yeah, and yet it was just that loud. Okay, go ahead.
So you're saying,
yes,
if we start an ND business,
yes,
that we should allow some neurotypicals in there, or at least not discriminate against all neurotypicals.
Right. That's what I'm ultimately saying is that I don't think we should exclude.
I think it would be hard to anyway, because how are you going to verify if somebody's neurodivergent or not?
Well, that's the other part of this too, is like if you put out, an ad for an opening, right? And you put neurodivergent people wanted, right? I mean, you could put that in the advertisement for the job opening. And if people apply, you can't ask. Well, currently, the way our laws go, you can't ask somebody if they are.
By the way, this is a kind of a small tangent, but did you see the text message that your wife received about a play the other day? About, I think it was Christmas. Was it? No, it was Wizard of Oz.
Oh, Wizard of Oz. Oh, yeah. Oh, did you see the entire advertisement for the Wizard of Oz from that theater company?
No.
But, oh my God, because they're hold on. I did see it, and hold on. I want to get to where you are, but I want to put some context for people listening. So this theater company, who I will not name, I will not do the name because I don't actually want to put them on blast. It's just the way they advertised their Wizard of Oz, being neurodivergent affirming, being inclusive for the neurodivergent people. Okay, specifically autism. They were talking about expanding their inclusivity to include. Well, for one, I got asked to not be in a fucking play because of my fucking issues, my fucking proximity to my face fucking issues. They wanted me to kiss somebody in the fucking play, and they asked me to not be in the play anymore because I wasn't willing to kiss somebody. But they also didn't tell me that I had to kiss somebody at the beginning when they offered me the job. Anyway, I just want to point that out because I'm neurodivergent and I was asked to not be in a fucking play. But now tell the other part.
Well, I had an issue with another.
Okay.
Because I won't name them either, but there were a few larger theaters that I had applied to work for, and I was told that being autistic wasn't diversity. Because it didn't say they were looking for like racial minorities or I think what they were looking for is somebody LGBTQ or a person of color, but they didn't say that. They just said they were looking for people with different backgrounds, people who had, people who were diverse in different ways. So I brought up like that I've had trouble working different places because of my,
because of being autistic. Yeah,
that I have trouble in a lot of, but I also pointed out that I had a lot of skills that are relevant to the job. And but anyway. Yeah. It's funny how they say these things, but the way they act is different. But that's not what I was bringing it up for. It's brought up because of the text message.
Right.
Did you see the message? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I exactly know. I exactly saw it. I just find it interesting because this company, this nonprofit, this community theater group is advertising about being inclusive of neurodivergent people.
I also thought it was interesting.
Yet they relegated them to just being the fucking munchkins.
Yeah, they cast the munchkins as somebody who's DD.
Yeah.
And I was
so developmentally delayed for people who don't know what DD is.
So that's what I thought was, I saw the message and I just kind of laughed. I'm like, really?
Me too. Like on a side funny moment, that's fucking funny.
So you decide to, hey, we want a diverse cast. Let's
Right.
make the Munchkins DD.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like, if soapbox moment, if you're gonna say you're neuroaffirming, if you're gonna say you want to be inclusive, then actually be inclusive. Take the person who's autistic, whatever fucking level, autistic, and put them as the star, put them as the co-star. Don't just put somebody in it as a background fucking player. I actually made this assessment. I equated it very similarly and in a very, very loose way. I equated it to when African-American people, when Black people were only put on in movies and TV as the dancer behind the white star.
Or as a token.
Yeah, the token. Like, it's the same fucking idea to me. Like, give us a whole fucking play. Not story, but put us in the fucking play.
Our token neurodivergent people
Right.
playing Munchkins.
But
we probably
also,
don't have any speaking lines.
But also understand what it means to have somebody who is neurodivergent there. We have sensory issues. We have days where we have meltdowns. Well, we don't show up to rehearsal 100% of the time.
This is coming back to my whole original thought experiment.
Relatively speaking, you're right.
So wouldn't it...
Because we were only arguing my wanting to include NTs.
Theoretically, wouldn't it be easier for somebody, maybe us, to make a neurodivergent...
business?
Yes, but neurodivergent theater company.
Yes, and actually we've talked about trying to do that.
And put on plays where we actually cast mostly...
people with differences.
I would say... especially for like a community theater or something, would be hard to only cast neurodivergent people.
Well, I think maybe we might have to stray outside of neurodivergent, but why not just people with mental differences?
Yeah, whatever. But the point is that this comes back to my whole idea about the business.
Identifying.
So now
differences.
This is the whole reason why I brought it up as far as in the context of a business is we keep trying so hard to have other people make accommodations for us.
Right.
Or we try hard to mask and fit into their environment. Right. So it was a combination of we ask for certain accommodations, we try to fit in, and we try to mask.
Yeah, we get what little scraps they throw at us.
And we don't like it. It's stressful for us. A lot of us can't hold a job, or if we do hold a job, we get fired frequently, or we're bouncing around from job to job, or we're doing all these different things. Yeah. Rather than do all that, why don't we just start a business that's accepting of our people and that works for our people? And if somebody neurotypical wants to work there, they have to work in
our way. Yeah, in our way. Yeah. Yeah. Fit into our box. And I agree with you. Like I said at the very beginning of this, I see there's pros and cons, right? There's good, bads to it. I think one of the best parts to it is that people are getting their needs met. And more specifically, not just their needs, but they're getting a more desirable environment to thrive in. And I agree with that.
One of the things you said off camera was that you think that like you're limiting yourself as to who you hire. So if you only hire NDs, that there may be certain skills or maybe certain points of view, certain whatever that you may be missing from NT people. Right. But because I don't necessarily agree with
style
that.
Is different.
And I understand that portion of it. Right. But I think that for any position, with maybe some specific, there may be some, like you could probably come up with certain examples that could be an exclusion. Maybe. But I think that for the majority of situations, you could find somebody who's neurodivergent who could fit into any role that you needed. If you have somebody who has Tourette's and they're an excellent COO, what does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Why do I need a neurotypical COO?
Right.
Let me hire somebody who has.
Here, hold on though. Like name a job. So let's say we're doing a let's say coffee shop. Okay. Would you want the person? And I'm not saying they can't do the job. I'm just saying thinking about what goes on with them. And granted, I'm a little ignorant when it comes to fucking Tourette's. I know there's something about twitches and spasms and possibly saying, that's what I said, a spasm.
No, well, tick isn't just necessarily a spasm, but the tick is any of the behavior.
I have that neck twitch that I do. Yeah. Yeah. I was told it's minor Tourette's, whatever the fuck that means. Anyway,
I got accused of it too because of certain things I do.
Because of little twitches you have, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm using the wrong terms. Again, I'm kind of
I never noticed them, but other people would point it out all the time.
Oh, okay.
And I never talked to it about a doctor or anything like that.
Well, I've got that neck twitch where I go from here to here in kind of a rather quick way. But anyway, what I'm saying is if somebody's pouring coffee, would you want, and I'm not trying to exclude anybody from anything.
Here we go.
Yep. That's,
do you want Michael J. Fox
y'all know where I'm going
coffee?
with this, I bet. What?
So do you want Michael J. Fox pouring your coffee? Is that what you're saying?
By the way, God, why am I laughing so hard at that? All right. And I am not making fun of Michael J. Fox whatsoever or anybody who has Parkinson's. And I'm
just keep them away from the macchiatos.
I'm just looking at it from a realistic standpoint. And this could be ableist of me. I don't fucking know. I'm still working on my own ableism shit. Okay. I'm just thinking of.
Well, you're older.
108. Oh, yeah, that's true, actually.
No, because your generation's all like, there's no excuse. You're from that generation.
I am not from that generation. That generation is before me.
Well, you grew up in that, probably an environment where it's like, I think the reason why a lot of people who are our age and older, we were always told that there's no excuse. So like you have kind of like this, sometimes this ableist attitude without necessarily meaning to act that way.
Right. Which is why I kind of feel guilty for saying this, but I don't want somebody with 180 degree coffee even pouring it into a cup near their own hand.
Yeah.
Because what if they have a muscle spasm at that given moment and they burn themselves? And I'm not saying they could sue me for fucking disability or whatever, or like harm at work. I'm not worried about that part. They're burning their own hand.
Wouldn't that just be an accommodation thing where you say, well, we don't want that person?
Yes. Like,
because I don't think that person probably wouldn't want to be pouring coffee if they know that they're probably going to spill it on themselves.
But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because you're absolutely right. If somebody has Tourette's, it doesn't prevent them or doesn't cause any issue whatsoever for them being COO. Right. But I wouldn't want them pouring the coffee because they might burn themselves, right? I wouldn't want them necessarily to
Depends on what their tick is.
Well, it depends. You're absolutely right. It depends on what the tick is. Because if it's a little facial twitch, whatever. I'm saying like my twitch is my head goes from center all the way to here. And it does it in a rather abrupt manner, if you will. Rather quick kind of manner. But what happens is that my left shoulder will twitch up as well. So if I had that coffee pot in my hand on my left side and I'm going to pour it, but all of a sudden my arm twitches, I'm pouring that everywhere. And maybe I burn my hand with it. I would not want that, right? So like at my age of 43, knowing that I have this more pronounced than I ever have in my life, would I be the best and most ideal person to pour hot fucking coffee? And by the way, I know at Starbucks, they put the cup under the thing and they got the little thing. So there's less risk of that. I get that, everybody. I'm just throwing out an example. But I wouldn't want me to be the person with the coffee pot going like this because I might fucking twitch, right? Like I'm actually thinking about this from a lived experience point of view on it. But would it stop that person who has whatever Tourette's tick there is? Would that stop that person from running the register? No. Does it stop them from taking orders? No. Does it stop them from bringing that coffee to somebody? Potentially not. It doesn't stop them from being a good customer service person.
Well, you would have to figure out, that's more of a in the weeds thing where it depends on the individual person.
I happen to like living in that.
Yeah, well, and with Tourette's, it depends because there's a lot of different ways that people their ticks can manifest. It could be a verbal tick. Maybe they just yell something.
Right.
Maybe
I'm actually, that one right there, a lot of people won't hire somebody who has the verbal tics from Tourette's as doing customer service or doing advertising or like public relations. I would have no fucking problem with that. A, I don't mind swearing. But B, because they can't control that. And that doesn't stop them from when they're talking well, or rather when they're not twitching.
Maybe you could start a coffee shop that only has people with Tourette's.
I mean, we did talk about starting a coffee shop called Roasted, and we just make fun of people.
And so part of the experience of coming in there, you just know people are going to be yelling shit the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. We put a sign on the door that says you will hear cursing and someone will make fun of you.
But not everybody who has Tourette's actually swears.
No, actually,
they don't even necessarily say a word. Sometimes they just make a noise. Maybe they don't say anything and they just twitch. It depends on what the tick is.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the ones that the stereotype is like the smallest number of Tourette's.
It's just like with autism, there's lots of different ways that people might need accommodation. It's the same thing with Tourette's because not everybody with Tourette's is the same. As far as frequency and what they do.
Like me and you could probably go an 8-hour day working a job any retail job because we have, and be just fine. But at the end of the day, we're a little bit more tired than other days.
I actually
A little more stressed out, maybe.
when I was younger, I actually enjoyed working at coffee shops because of the fast pace.
Yes, me too.
I didn't really have time to think about stuff, so my
Right.
brain just kind of shut off, and I'm just
You're going through the motions.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, like,
I agree.
It's very like I just and usually customers are not too much of a problem because everybody loves coffee and people usually aren't rude. Occasionally, but most of the time, you don't get asshole customers in a coffee shop.
See, I never minded working retail with tough customers because I knew they were going to be there. The expectation was already there that they're going to be there. And so I never had a problem with
I
that.
don't have a problem with tough customers either, but it depends. Like 99% of the time I'm fine.
Right.
But if I'm already in a bad mood or I'm stressed out or I'm like burnt out and then I get to deal with that person, that's when I have a problem.
Right. When I'm already on that borderline.
And then I got to deal with some asshole. Then I'm like, I've had to restrain myself like from blowing up at people, like, because I knew I couldn't, but I was like, I just wanted to tell somebody to go fuck themselves.
Right.
Like, fuck you. Just fuck you.
Yeah. I unfortunately did not have as much restraint as you sometimes. And I have actually, like, when somebody was complaining about service or whatever, just kind of went, I mean, you could always fucking leave.
Yeah.
And like, of course, somebody complains to my boss about me and my boss goes, you can't swear. And I'm like, okay, I actually can swear. You just don't want me to. Yeah. So I got pedantic on somebody else. So anyway, I think ultimately, just so we can kind of wrap up a little bit on your thought idea here, I think ultimately more people would be served by that business, but I don't know how effective, quote unquote, effective that business ultimately would become. Because I think...
Depends on what the business is.
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to a lot of those extra factors.
And it depends on what accommodations you need to make for all your different employees. I think something like customer facing, like a coffee shop, would be more difficult. I was thinking more something like, let's say, a web-based ad company. Like, let's say we make ads. It's a company where we make
So like the employee search engine company that we interviewed somebody for? Like that business?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't thinking that specifically, but let's say like we make video ads or we make graphics and we do advertising. What do they call it? What's that?
Digital marketing?
Yeah, but there's a specific term I'm looking, like a copywriter, like copywriting. Okay. Let's say we help develop brands for people, whatever. But if you're doing like digital marketing and branding, like it's not as customer facing necessarily. And maybe you have your people who are best at dealing with B2B with other businesses or customers. Those are the people who go out and talk to the clients.
Right.
But if you have somebody who's like level 2 and they're really good at doing art and stuff, and you just have them sit in the office or sit in their own little office and they draw and do all the graphics, whatever. Fuck, what's wrong with that?
I don't have a problem with it.
But a coffee shop is a little more difficult because there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of customer facing stuff.
But that's what I mean. I think it would be effective for the people, but I don't know how effective of a business it would become.
I still think it depends on.
I agree, but I even think the graphics design or the marketing,
but think of it this way.
Kind of thing, I think that would suffer a little bit too. Not suffer. Let me not put that in capitalist terms.
Let's say you have ADHD.
Yeah.
Or let's say you're someone who's autistic, maybe level 1, level 2, but maybe you have really bad sensory issues. Maybe you have trouble sleeping, stuff like that.
Yeah.
If I run a business that does digital marketing.
Yeah.
And let's say the deadline is I need you to have this graphic done by the 5th. If you're doing it at 2 a.m, I don't give a fuck.
Right. I don't give a shit when you do it as long as you get it done.
Right. So as long as the work is getting done,
right.
It doesn't matter to me if you're working during business hours or after hours. Working on your own schedule for a business like that
works well.
Yeah, you could even do it at home. Just get the graphic done and send it in.
Right. But unfortunately, there's not enough of those businesses. And also, I do want to point out that not everyone who's on the spectrum is fucking good with a computer. I'm not.
I didn't say good with a computer. I was talking about like art.
Yeah, not all of us are good at art. I'm not.
They're not. But I had to pick an example.
I know you had to. No, and I
had to pick
I agree with you. What I'm trying to point out with that is like, when it comes to that, we don't give a shit when they get it done as long as it gets done kind of thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most businesses have to have business hours of some type, and they can't always do accommodation.
Especially if it's customer facing, like a coffee shop. But that's why I was saying.
Wow. How come the first 3 times you said customer facing in this, I kind of went, oh, what does he mean? But then when you just said it in the context of the coffee shop, somehow it clicked that time.
Customer facing meaning
I know what
a
it
retail
means.
store or
Yes.
something like that.
Now I got it. It's just the way
But if you're
worded it.
doing digital marketing, it doesn't matter what your hours are because
Right,
you're
not at all.
you don't have customers coming into your business. That's what it means. Like
Yeah,
customer
yeah,
facing.
I said I got it.
It's
I just call it customer service.
it's like I'm trying to think of other businesses that are not customer facing.
Well, anything web-based is automatically non-customer
Yeah, but
facing.
there's other types of businesses too.
Publishing is one.
yeah,
that would
like-
be mostly non-customer facing.
Yeah, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Whatever your hours are, it doesn't matter as
Right.
long as you're producing the content.
Yeah,
producing the work.
exactly. Well, like if me and you ran a coffee shop, but also did the roasting side of it,
Right.
the roasting side we don't need
Right.
to
So
keep
yeah, if you're a
specific
coffee
hours.
roaster,
Yeah,
you do it whenever you need to.
yeah, we
If
can
you're a
grind,
winemaker,
package, roast. Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're open to the public and you have people come to your
Right.
vineyard, but if you're just making wine or making beer, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I could be
When the fuck
making
does it
beer
matter?
at fucking 3 a.m. Who
Right.
cares? As long
It's
as the beer's
probably
made.
better beer that way.
The next part of the thought experiment.
Yes, please.
Because
Yeah, fuck the time, dude.
we're already 45 minutes in.
Yeah, I don't care about the time.
So
Let's
the
just
second
keep going.
piece of this, the first thing I thought about
Yeah.
was the business, and then I took it a step further.
Well, you did. And
So, by the way, a
dig
co-op
this.
is.
I know what a.
Well,
I kind of don't. I kind of don't in the business aspect of it.
So, a co-op is. Like
everybody holds part in it.
It's like a socialist business, basically.
So everybody has ownership.
Yeah. So, every employee owns part of the business.
Wait, kind of like Chobani was.
And then all the profits are shared.
Wasn't that how Chobani was?
It might be. I don't know.
Oh,
So yeah.
okay. I could be really wrong
It's
on
like
that Chobani
if
thing.
you, me,
I could be wrong.
and 2 other people
Yeah,
started a coffee business,
right.
and we were a co-op, technically the ownership would be split 4 ways, and all the profits would be shared among the 4 people.
Right.
That's a co-op.
Okay.
Essentially, that's a dumbed down version of what a co-op is. But yeah,
But in a co-op, all the people are also working and they hold like
Right.
profit sharing.
but not everybody would want that.
No,
That's
not
the thing
like
is, like,
stockholders.
I think
Not
part of the
Yeah, not like
I think
stockholders.
co-ops are fine.
Yeah.
But not everybody wants to be like, because if you work for a co-op,
Right.
it also implies you have more responsibility because you're part owner too. So like if you're just a regular employee, but you're also part owner of the business, the idea is that a co-op would theoretically be more productive of a business because everybody has more incentive to
Right.
provide.
Everybody's invested more.
Right. Because
Yeah.
you're getting more out of it.
Right.
But not everybody wants that extra responsibility that
Okay.
comes along with that. Let's say like if you work in mental health,
Right.
what do you care about? Like, I don't know. Like, is the profit incentive there for you to like bust your ass to make extra money? Like somebody
No.
might not want to. If you want to be a psychiatrist and you just want to help
Right.
help people and listen to people and talk to
Right.
people, you might not give a shit about working at a co-op because like there's no incentive. Maybe you don't have no personal drive for that.
Right. Well, because in my line of work, it's you have to be more motivated by the assistance, help, and connection that you have with other people opposed to money. Like a lot of people, and I'd like to mention that it's partially not true, but a lot of people in my field like to say, you don't go into it for the money. Ha ha ha. Motherfucker, you can make 6 figures fucking working in mental health, all
You
right?
could also make 6 figures working on the other side.
What?
The opposite of what you do.
The opposite of what I do? You mean selling drugs?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you can make 6 figures quicker
Yeah.
selling drugs than fucking being in my field. In my field, you have to spend 6 figures to make 6 figures, okay?
So
You got to
the
get a
opposite
master's
side.
degree or more.
So the next side of the thought experiment, the first part
Yeah.
was the business,
Right.
or like having a co-op or whatever. The second part I was thinking is, would people who are neurodivergent
Mm-hmm.
overall,
Yes.
so this is a general thing, so I got to go big picture first here before
Yeah,
you get
and
to the
then
weeds.
let me bring it down to tininess.
Um,
Yes.
Overall, so what do I mean by overall? I mean, would they be able to meet more of their goals? Would they live a more happy life in general? What does happy mean? Whatever. Think about whatever you want.
Yeah.
But would they, in general, live a better life in a commune?
Right.
Or a communist society? By communist society,
Yeah.
I don't mean like Stalin, Mao.
I
I
was
mean,
just
like,
about to say that too.
I mean
Yeah.
like an actual. I mean,
Are we talking more socialist society?
the reason I say commune is because a commune is much easier to conceptualize because it's
Yes.
small. It's
Yes, it is.
It's a small community,
Right.
Versus a communist society. I think is when you get onto the big scale like that, it's
Right.
much more difficult. Which is probably why most communist states fail, is because
Right.
it's very difficult when you go on a bigger level like that. But there, you haven't really played it, but in the game series The Last of Us,
Yes.
it's a zombie game, they have, I forget the name of the town. I think it's like
Doesn't matter.
no, but
Okay.
they build this town out in the mountains.
Yeah.
And they have a farm and it's a little commune. Like
Right.
they live in a post-apocalyptic society.
Mhm.
They don't have currency. They just, everybody does something. Somebody raises the sheep, somebody raises the horses.
Right.
Somebody makes shoes. Somebody sews clothes, and they all just
everybody has a task to do. They do the task, and everybody gets to survive based on it.
I am by no means like a big tree hugging.
He is not
hippie socialist or anything like that.
He is none of those things.
I think that some people might not like this, but I think that capitalism at the end of the day, and by capitalist I mean a real capitalist society, not
right, not the bullshit we live in.
Yeah, because we actually don't have a real free market. We have crony capitalism. We have corporatism, where like we have all these big companies that have way too much influence and control.
Right.
Whereas in like in order for capitalism to actually function properly, you have to have more competition.
Right. Is it closer to the way that we know Sweden works? Is that closer to a free market than us?
I guess. So they actually have a pretty free market, but I mean, just like, if you have, I think at some point, like companies get too big and they have too much influence, too much control. Yeah. I think in order for capitalism to work better, you need like smaller companies competing with each other.
But more of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, the point is, I'm not like, I think the capitalism overall is like the best economic system that we got, even though it's not perfect. I think at some point we may get to a point where technology gets to the point where we don't need capitalism. Like if we lived in a Star Trek like society where you can get anything you need instantly, then you don't really need to have capitalism anymore.
Right. And people just worked because the work needed to be done.
Yeah. But we're not at that point yet.
No,
so I
not
think
at all.
But anyway, the point is, in a commune,
yes,
would it be better for our type of people? Because theoretically, it may be easier to accommodate people because
to a degree,
because you wouldn't have the pressure and expectations to do certain things because of
you're right. There's not the social expectation imposed onto people or the productivity or profit.
So if we live in a commune and we say Jack is really good at, I don't know,
building fences.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So let's say Jack's really good at building fences. We just let him build all the fences and he does carpentry in town.
Right. And that's it. Yeah.
Right.
But he's providing a service for the town. Right. And so he gets to eat, he gets to have internet, all that kind of stuff.
Right. So you just do whatever it is you're good at or whatever it is that
you're capable to provide.
Whatever works for the society.
Okay. So the reason why I said yet again, good and bad is I think it would help more people in the society if we were like that. I think it would help more neurodivergent people if we were like that. I also believe that some accommodations would impose on other people's accommodations. I think in a commune, I think some things would end up
give me an
interfering.
Example,
so I don't have a great example of it. I'm just proposing.
Well, I know what you're saying, but I don't know like what's an example of somebody's accommodation affecting someone else's accommodation.
Let's
because we're talking to this commune wouldn't be all neurodivergent people.
No, it would be all people.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just that the people who are neurodivergent in that commune, I think that when you don't have to worry about money, that it's much easier for society to accept and to make accommodations for those people because there's less of that. We have like this weird competitive thing, and I think people are fucking nosy Karens and worry about what everybody else is doing. Well, how come Nick gets to wear headphones? How come Nick gets to take sensory breaks and I don't get to take extra breaks because I'm whatever? Like, I think people worry too much about that shit.
They do. They absolutely do. They give a shit more about somebody else potentially getting a benefit over them opposed to looking at what it really is.
But I think a lot of that stuff wouldn't be as big of an issue if you lived in a commune.
I agree. And I think one of the main reasons is exactly taking money out of the equation.
You also have...
We wouldn't have people evaluating their self-worth.
Well, there's also another piece you're missing here, which is actually more of a conservative argument.
Okay.
Is that, even though it's funny, because I'm bringing up a conservative point, but in the context of a commune, which is...
In a very left way.
That most conservatives would not agree with. It's that you have a closer knit society, a closer knit, like if you have it's
there's more connection in the society with one another.
Yeah, it's like why conservatives argue about like going to church is good is because you build connections with other people.
Yes.
You build a community.
Yes.
Right? And so in a commune,
Yes.
That's what it is. You have a community. Everybody knows each other. So like,
and you have to deal with each other, actually.
If you're getting your food from Sarah and you're getting your wood from John, you're going to, build relationships with those other families because we've lost a lot of that in like modern day. Like people don't talk to their neighbors anymore. People don't. But I'm saying, I think if you're in a commune, you would give a shit more about the autistic kid who lives down the street because you're a closer knit.
And community. Also, how well is he being taken care of? You're right. You're right.
It's kind of like living in a tribal society where everybody takes care of each other.
And I think those of us who have social issues of some type, whether it's isolationist or because of the way we've been treated, I think that would help that a great deal, because we would still have, not only would we have to talk to other people, but they would actually come to talk to us. So it's not like us as the ND constantly have to try to fit into them or try to make connection with them. They're also coming to us because we are part of the community and saying, hey, what's up?
Yeah, I think when I've talked before
shit.
in other episodes about like some of the downsides of the modern world.
Yeah.
Because as much as I'm a big tech nerd, I love video games, I love technology, I love computers. I just built one recently. But I have like this inner like my id is like this little hippie boy who wants to live in the woods and play with animals.
Yeah.
And like part of me like kind of misses like that we used to have more of a connection with the community and we used to have more of a connection with like, I actually was a kid before the internet was a big thing, And I remember like growing up in a time where people actually, in the early 90s, people actually talked to their neighbors more. People went to church and they actually, not that I'm like a huge church person, but like.
Right. I think we should go back a little bit further to prior to the invention of the TV.
Maybe even then, but I'm just saying that like I love all the technology, but at the same time, like we've grown so distant from each other as people. True. Like we talk to each other through the internet and we dehumanize each other and we go in our little tribal groups and we fight with each other and we have these people with black or white thinking fighting each other left or right and all this stuff.
Because the echo chamber thing too.
Right.
That's far more prevalent now too.
But I mean, it's not obviously people fought for fucking,
of course,
all throughout history because my tribe is better than your tribe and et cetera. But I think I'm saying that there's something you're missing about like not having a close knit community.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not saying we should go back to like living in the 40s or whatever, 1930s or whatever. I'm just saying that there are some things we've lost because of the way that.
Right. There's a level of disconnection that we don't have anymore.
Right. It's easier for us to write people off and not care about people because we're not involved with them. They're not in our face as much. Right. We just talk to people through a screen. Right.
And then when we do talk to them, we immediately assume they're going to behave like us. And when they don't,
but if you lived in a little commune and you had some autistic people in the commune, even if you still had the internet and whatever, like you'd have to deal with these people. You would, I don't know, in a way, like certain situations force you to get along and understand people.
Well, and I would say though, this commune idea, if somebody was, especially an ND, and they
just
were,
a thought experiment, all right? I don't need the FBI coming after me.
Yeah, not at all. We don't need that. I think if somebody was born in this commune, right, and they were an ND,
Jonestown,
and I believe in this ND, I believe this ND would also have less trauma from growing up because they didn't grow up in an NT world and have to navigate that. They didn't have as many people making fun of them. And because other people around them were so accepting. Like, of course, there's going to be somebody in the commune who goes, well, that fucking kid, he needs to try harder.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to be shitty no matter what.
Yeah, of course, because people, that's what they do,
but
right?
we're talking about in general.
Yes,
most people would probably
be better.
Even if they did act like that.
Right.
At the end of the day, they would probably still
help out because that person's part of the community.
Right.
Yes.
Or still have that person's back.
Right. I think that ultimately, maybe that person still says things like, you don't look autistic. But at the end of the day, they're still going to help provide and also help accommodate you because you're part of the community. Well, yeah, we can hope.
That's why it's a thought experiment.
Right. I think so. I didn't
think too much about it. The idea popped in my head.
No, we're discussing now. Yeah. We're thinking now. I think one thing that comes to mind, and it could be my own pessimism about people. It could be, life experience or my own trauma when it comes to people. But I think there's always going to be somebody who's going to argue that somebody's getting too much accommodation. They're being overly protected or coddled.
I think it depends.
I think there will always be somebody who says those things. And I think if we have one of those people who's also a member of like the town council or the ruling body of whatever this commune society is, I think if that person has that influence, they're going to create issues for that person if they believe people are being overly coddled. Then again, if nobody gains from somebody not being coddled, I don't think that necessarily becomes an issue. Like if we remove the money idea, then there's nobody who believes themselves to be in a drastically higher status than another person.
I mean, again, in a commune, I guess you'd be arguing over who has the bigger house, or
I guess
who has the best corn in the grown in the yard.
But isn't that why
Jenny's corn is much more plump and much more yellow.
But isn't that why because people are fucking petty like that. Isn't that why in a bunch of the quote unquote communist governments or communist countries that we've seen today, isn't that why most of the houses look so identical and shit? Because
they wanted to remove as much difference as possible.
Right.
That's also why people got targeted that even had slight differences. So they went after the landowners, but then they went after the farmers who had the biggest farms.
Yes.
And killed those people
in an attempt to equalize things, even though all they were doing was just being shitty people.
The ironic thing was the people that they targeted who had larger farms. They had larger farms because they were the most successful and best farmers.
Right.
So then when they attacked those people, they ended up causing a famine.
Yes.
Because then they couldn't grow enough crops.
Yeah. Are you listening, Russia? This is why you don't go after those people.
But yeah,
that is who did that. Correct?
Well, here's the thing.
It's who did that, right?
Yeah, it was the Soviets.
It was Russia. Yeah.
But and it was Ukraine, that they targeted because that's where most of the grain is grown.
Right. That's why I was making that joke.
But the funny thing is, there is.
I just tried to scratch my ear with the headphone on. I literally just went like that.
There is. Okay. I know we don't live in a true meritocracy. We don't have a meritocratic society where people who are always
those have their own issues.
The people who are the best, but there is something to say for in that example, those people who had the most because they were the best at what they did.
Right.
And sometimes people are successful because they're just good at what they do.
Right.
But I think people have a tendency to feel jealous over people who are more successful than them. And it's kind of like, I know you're a big fan of Bezos.
Yeah, huh?
I know a lot of people hate Jeff Bezos.
Absolutely.
Mostly just because he's rich. And people also think
because he's rich.
Well, people also think that he treats his workers poorly and that he's selfish.
Yeah.
But he did work really hard to build up the company,
and
he had a good idea and he stuck with it, and he put a lot of work in. So I mean, the guy is successful because he was so good at what he did.
He saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
He took that opportunity. He worked that opportunity, and then everybody just bought from him. Like I want to point out that in the soapbox moment, but I'm just. Give me 30 seconds to say this. Do not blame or bitch that man has billions of dollars when your ass bought from Amazon. Do not do that. If you want to blame him for having $1 billion, you should probably clap your hands at him because he made a fucking $1 billion.
What about all the people who complain about poor wages and complain about minimum wage or complain about wages being too low, but then they buy Apple products that are made from basically slave labor in China?
The hypocrisy in that bullshit.
I mean,
right? Give me more fucking money because I'm living paycheck to paycheck when the product I just bought is being made by somebody who barely affords to eat every day. Yeah. Come the fuck on.
It doesn't mean that.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't mean that you can't you can. But I'm just saying we end up supporting all these businesses that we like to complain about.
What other people like to complain about. Let's point that out. I mean, don't get me wrong. Do I think Jeff Bezos could put a little bit more scrutiny on his company to evaluate whether his employees are being treated better or not?
Well,
yes, I do.
A lot of the warehouse workers.
Right. And that's just it, though. When your warehouse manager or your regional director is the one creating these policies that are fucking with people, it ain't Jeff Bezos' fault. It's that human being who created that issue. Hold on. But it's Jeff's responsibility, being the owner and operator of that company, to know the effect that the company is having on people all the way down.
I don't know what type of policies or whatever they have, but I would imagine that if it is those people making those decisions, because I don't really know.
Yeah, I know.
If it is, then you have to look at what the incentive structures are in place that makes them want to create those rules, because there must be some sort of incentive where they have to get things done in a certain time frame, or maybe they get paid extra money.
Maybe their bonus is bigger or some shit.
based on it. So there might be certain policies or incentive structures in place that are driving those shitty working conditions.
It's motivating the wrong kind of environment. And
but I don't know.
The commune idea we're talking about, the lack of money, the lack of personal gain out of it, I think would remove some of that ill treatment of somebody else.
You also have to worry about people actually, I mean, in order for it to work, people have to actually do shit. So
but if you're having people do something that they're good at, it means they're also going to draw some level of satisfaction or enjoyment out of the activity.
Theoretically.
That's what I'm saying.
But what if you just don't feel like doing it and you just decide I'm not going to
do it? Well, like Jack decides today he's not going to build the fence?
Yeah, or like, let's say...
Okay, great. Pick up the hammer in 2 days when you do feel like building the fence.
Nick, your job is to cut wood, right? We want you to cut wood. We need wood to burn in all our fireplaces, otherwise we're going to be cold.
You know what's fucking crazy about that? I actually do like woodworking.
And let's say you wake up one morning and just like, I don't feel like cutting wood today.
Okay, great.
And then the rest of us are going to be cold because you don't have...
No,
I'm just saying
no,
in order for...
No, hold on. And I'll, by the way, yes, you are correct if it was as finite as the scenario you just said. But being what I am and who I am, let's put context on this, right? I know full well I have X number of days in me, right, to work straightforward and be super productive, right? Ask my boss, I only have X number of days that I'm fucking great at what I do. And then I have a series of a couple of days where I'm not so. So considering bipolar, right? When I'm manic, I'm rather productive. I'm rather engaged. I'm really good at logistic planning. I'm really like motivated and moving forward, right? But when I get depressed, I'm none of those things. I'm way less than in all of those categories I just named off, right? But because I know that when I have the energy, motivation, and drive, I try to put things in place to also get me through the times where I'm not.
Right, but that's you. I'm just saying in general, people have to...
I'm giving this as an example of like, each one of us needs to know that about ourselves.
Right, but I'm just saying that
your less productive times?
In order for the society to function, everybody has to contribute. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, but how they contribute.
So if you have too many people who just decide, I'm not going to do shit, then it falls apart.
But then why don't we have somebody else also doing that same job?
You could, but I'm saying you still need enough people to be hardworking enough to keep the society going. Because if you have too many people who don't, then everything falls apart.
In generics, you're absolutely right. In generalities, you're absolutely right. When it's coming to this, we said Jack builds fences, right?
Yeah.
But in the reality of a society, even in a small town, in a commune, you don't have just Jack who knows how to build a fence.
He would probably
you got Jack, and you got Steve, and you got Sally, and you got Emma. You've got a bunch of people who all know how to do that job.
Yeah, you got the carpenters.
Right.
These are our carpenters.
I'm sorry. The second you said the carpenters, I thought about the singing group.
Right. And then we have Tom, Dick, and Harry, and they're men at work. And then we have... And then we have... It's not that funny.
No, but it's one of those jokes that fucking breaks me. Okay.
And then we're gonna have the kids. We can have, a couple autistic kids. They can be smashing pumpkins. Just let them.
Dude, no offense to this gentleman, but Billy Corrigan definitely looks like he's autistic.
We have,
he was the lead singer of Smashing Pumpkins, right? Yeah.
The end of fall, we just have all the kids go around and smash pumpkins.
So we can make our pumpkin spice lattes.
Right. That's right. There would be no child labor laws in my commune. Those kids would be put to work.
Yeah, none. But but that's kind of the thing about it is like if you have somebody who has bipolar, if you have somebody who has major depressive disorder, if you have somebody who has an anxiety disorder, and they're doing a job, but their difference kind of comes into conflict with their productivity, their, how much they're providing for the society, you got somebody who's a backup. And the thing about it is not that the other person is now doing more work than them, because when you get back on the upswing again, why can't that person take a break?
Everything you're saying is making sense. I understand. Yes. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, you still need, in order for it, people have to be bought into it in order for it to work. That's what I'm saying. Like, you have to be, I agree with you. You can't just be like, I'm going to go live in a commune. Like, you have to know that you have to
provide something.
You have to pull your weight.
So years ago, My father, who for quite some time was a professional woodworker, professional wood turner, he used to go to New Zealand, I think for a conference or a gathering or he used to go to New Zealand. And he actually once told me, and I don't know if this is 100% true, and I don't remember if he 100% told me this, but I'm pretty sure this is how it went. He said that to apply for citizenship there, on the application, it actually asks what you're going to be providing for the society, for the country.
What, Australia?
Yeah.
New Zealand?
No, New Zealand.
Yeah. I know immigrating to Australia and New Zealand are both very difficult.
It's very difficult.
From what I've heard. Yeah.
So that's interesting to me that it's right there on the application, right, for it of how are you going to benefit me? Why should I bring you in? And what are you going to do for
they
me?
have no reason to technically. I mean, like why should we take you into our country?
Well, especially New Zealand, and not that I want to speak for them, but they're a small ass fucking country, right? They have an environment, an environment that they want to protect, right? Like, so if you're some I don't know, coal miner, and that's the only service you provide is digging in the fucking dirt, by the way, there's way more to coal mining than digging in the dirt. I'm not trying to make your job sound insignificant, but it probably sounds that way. That's the only thing you provide for the society and they don't fucking need that, why in the fuck would they let you in?
Is that where they filmed Lord of the Rings? Was it New Zealand?
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Hard, strong question mark on that.
Yeah. I don't remember.
Huh?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was New Zealand. Because isn't Peter Jackson New Zealand?
I don't know.
Isn't he from New Zealand?
I don't know.
Me neither. He's Australian or New Zealand. I know he's got an accent, and I'm American. I'm dumb about the rest of the world. I don't know.
He's either Aussie or a Kiwi. Either one.
One of the two. Speaking of which, why don't we ask Ben? Ben's from there. Just saying. Oh, he went to did you see him on Instagram? Not to completely sidetrack everything we've been fucking talking about for the last hour and a half, but did you see his Instagram real quick? He went to a movie premiere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not too long ago.
Nice.
All right. We had a really good conversation with the guy.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is a thought experiment we should pose to him because he's from a very different society than we are.
Yeah.
This would probably be a cool conversation with him at some point. So anyway.
I never thought I would be advocating communism. I'm just kidding. I'm not really advocating communism.
No, you're not. No,
I'm just saying,
but it's fucking
theoretically,
funny.
because I think on a large scale, it's like I said before,
it would be very difficult.
I think if you tried to make the U.S. into a socialist or a communist, and by socialist I mean more socialist than we are.
Yeah,
more socialist than quote unquote socialist countries. I mean a real socialist society.
Yes.
I think it would be very difficult because that's part of the reason why we have states to begin with is because depending on what part of the country you live in, it's very different.
Right.
And the needs of each state is very different, which is why states have their own laws and have their own thing. So
that's why the 10th Amendment literally says that anything not covered by the Constitution goes to the states.
I think trying to make a whole, especially overnight, is very difficult. But if you start with I think communes can work because it's a little microcosm. It's
can
a little.
They work?
Yeah, I think so. Small,
because none of them ever did.
Not Jonestown, but
why do you always go to Jonestown when we're talking about
they have because essentially a commune would be pretty much just like living in a.
What's the longest running commune? Because there was a bunch of them in the 60s.
You didn't let me finish.
Oh, okay.
I think living in a commune would essentially just be like living in a tribe. It's like tribal societies lived for thousands of years, or not tens of thousands of years, whatever.
Yeah.
And even in prehistory, you had cultures that essentially were like communes where they didn't necessarily have money and people grew food and they gave food and people bartered and traded. I think you would still have, instead of having currency, I think people would still trade. Think you would, but yeah, I think there's no reason why it wouldn't be able to work. The only reason why it wouldn't work is I think a lot of the problems with modern communes have been the reasons for the existence of it. Like Jonestown was like a religious cult. So I think that there's a problem where a lot of communes. Didn't Manson have a commune?
Yes.
Too? Yeah.
Which is why I think it's funny you keep bringing up Jonestown because David Koresh had one.
Yeah.
Fucking
that's the problem because a lot of the communes you hear about are all these fucking crazy people and cults.
So I do want to point something out though. When we're talking about a commune, we're talking about a collective of people not with a single ideology working together. We're talking about a group of people who want to work together.
No, just it's basically think of a a town,
right?
Where everybody in the town, they grow their own food.
Yeah,
they have people who
they're actually helping each other.
They chop down trees and make their own. They make their own furniture. They just make everything themselves.
Right. The way things at one point was in any society.
Right.
Before the overrun of companies and all that shit.
You just chop down trees. You hunt your own food. You grow your own crops. You
hunt your own food.
Yeah.
God, no! I want to go to Stop and Shop. No, I want to go to the local in your context.
Do you imagine how much
I'm
better?
I'm gonna go down to the local butcher and have his ass cut some shit for me.
Do you know how much better it would taste if you caught your own fish and filleted it up?
No, it wouldn't taste any different.
To me, I actually take satisfaction in like making. My
I know,
own
but
stuff.
that doesn't make the fish taste any different.
When I haven't grown vegetables in a while, but when I used to grow my own vegetables and stuff, like something about just like picking something right off the vine and making it, it's like fresh, it tastes good.
Right, but you also don't have the same tactile issues that I have. The entire idea of picking it off the fucking vine is partially terrifying to me.
What about, like, you don't have to hunt anything. You could be a vegetarian. But, like, I'm sure you would
digging it out of the ground?
You'd want to eat fish or something, or potatoes.
Right, and I would ask somebody else to do it.
I have some deer, venison.
Right, I'd have somebody else do it. And when they're having a bad fucking day and they need a shoulder to cry on, come on over, buddy. Let's have a cup of coffee. I will talk you through it.
Use the fur, use the skin. Like, don't waste any parts of the animal.
Okay, I just want to point this out, that all of what you're describing, there are already these places in the United States that this exists.
I want to become Native American and go live in a tribe.
Like, you want to be an indigenous human.
I'm not.
No, but quite honestly, this is why we need to look at those societies.
I'm not Liz Warren, so I can't do it.
God damn, somebody gonna bitch about that one. All right.
I don't care if you're left leaning or right leaning. The fact that she tried to pretend she was Native American for so long, it's just fucking shitty.
Like, she used it as an identity, but she can't. She ended up being like a 1/16 or 30.
I'm going to continue to make fun of her. I don't care.
Yeah, do your thing. Do your thing. You have every right to make fun of it. She is a public figure because you're not describing how good or bad of a person she is. You're just making fun of the fucking fact that she would identify that way when she.
All right, here's the thing. It's going to get me in trouble.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to say it anyway.
Remember, me and Steve are two human beings that are separate from each other. We have two separate different opinions about things.
So I have to preface this by saying that I'm not a huge Trump fan or anything like that.
Yeah,
because I have to say this because if I say anything about Trump, people are going to be like, oh, he loves Trump.
Yeah.
No. But I did think it was dumb when people said he was racist for calling her Pocahontas.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, not that he isn't racist, but I'm just saying calling somebody Pocahontas because he wasn't calling her Pocahontas to make fun of Native Americans or make fun of Pocahontas. Right. He was calling her Pocahontas to make fun of her for pretending to be Native American.
Right.
So I think that, like, when people say, "Oh, it's racist for her to call it," and like, how is that? He's mocking her.
Right. He was making fun of it, and it turns out that she's not really all that much.
Yeah. So
when I say not that much, I mean so little, in fact, that
maybe
we could call me Native American, but we're not going to.
Like, I guess you could make an argument that it's like racially insensitive or something because he's using the name of like a famous Native woman, but I guess
I would agree with that because he used the recognizable name of a Native American woman.
Other people used to call her Pocahontas.
Funny, but also I think it's also racially insensitive in that way too.
But like,
whatever. Or culturally insensitive.
I think what she did was worse.
Yes, I do believe what she did was fucking a bad fucking idea for a fucking public figure to do. Hold on, I want to go back on our point though. We need to start looking at societies like that and groups like that because their culture has survived amazing amounts of hardship and still maintained the idea that everybody helps each other.
I don't know anything about this, but what is it like for an autistic person in like a native tribe?
No idea. That's probably something we should find out.
Like, how do they, I don't want to say how do they treat them because that sounds weird, but I don't know. What is it like in, like, if you're not, like, how do they deal with it?
I want to ask that question. I want to ask the question of how are people who have differences than the rest of the group, how are they treated
because I don't know
in indigenous people's tribes or societies?
I'm going to imagine it would probably depend on the tribe itself.
I would agree.
Because there's like, so many different, cultures are different depending. I mean, they share a similar cultural heritage being Native Americans.
Kind of.
But the culture, each tribe was, had their own specificities, their own religious beliefs, their own. Yeah.
I would be interested to find out because that idea extends beyond NDs or autistic. That goes into
rather.
like the LGBT community. How are they treated in that society?
Yeah.
Right. And it is communal living, right?
Yeah.
Somebody farms and somebody helps raise the cattle and somebody's got the chickens and somebody's building houses and somebody's
we can
the
get Temple
doctor
to take
in town.
care of the cows for us in our
Yeah.
commune.
Yes. I hear she has some good cattle practices.
And we'll have you be the whipping boy.
Aw, that's so nice of you. But I think we need to look at those societies because, quite honestly, every time somebody says America's the best society, no matter what time period you're talking about, there is a large group of fucking people. And I'm not just talking one race or one gender, but there's a large group of fucking people at any given time that are not fucking doing well. And people write it off as they just didn't try hard enough. Fuck you. There's more to it than that. But you're proposing a society that works with people's differences opposed to forces people to try to fit.
I think that if the Native Americans tried harder,
square
they
round.
wouldn't have gotten sick from smallpox. That's what I was saying.
Oh my good God. I can't believe you just said that while we were recording. You know what? Regardless of when it is, whether we're recording or not, holy fuck.
It's sarcastic.
I know it was sarcasm, dude. And thank God you made me say it out loud.
They just had to try harder.
I know.
So I was making a joke because obviously you can't do anything about smallpox.
Okay, I actually heard somebody. Now, I do want to preface this with after they said this comment, and actually, unfortunately, it was years after this, I found out how fucking racist this person truly was. But they once said that if indigenous people had been better fighters, they would have not let white people on
but most of them were taken out by disease.
I know, and that's what I mean.
Actually,
though, is
considering
he's saying it's a failure of ability, not being overwhelmed by assholes.
They were
with
probably
guns.
most of them were probably
fuck.
Most of them were probably better fighters than the Europeans.
Guaranteed, they were fucking better fighters. But the point is,
the fact that it took Europeans so long, to conquer a lot of their areas just shows you like it doesn't matter that towards the end they were using guns too, but like even before that, like they were able to take out a lot of Europeans with just using bows and arrows and spears
who
and
had
shit.
superior technology and still took them out. But it's just the generalization that this person was making, the simplistic view of just, well, if they'd fought better, they would have beaten them.
Isn't there, you ever heard of that book? What is it called? Guns, Germs, and Steel?
Is that all about wiping out indigenous people?
Not
because that's what it sounds like.
It has to do with, it's a history book, and it has to do with explaining why certain civilizations have advanced more technologically than others. Yeah. And the explanation boils down to those three things: disease, access to metal and steel, and guns. They talked about the cultures that kind of like that dominated the countries that spread empires and took over the areas.
Right. All the countries that became
access
colonized
to those things. You know, like Japan had access to metal and steel and certain things like that, and they had access to gunpowder.
Aren't they the ones who came up with gunpowder?
Oh, it was the Chinese.
Oh, what'd you say?
Chinese invented black powder.
Didn't you say Chinese?
I said Japan.
Oh, I don't think those are the same cultures.
Anyway, you might find it interesting. You should look. I think there's actually, instead of reading it, I think they also made a movie version of it, so you can watch it instead.
Oh, good. Because you know I don't like to read.
But yeah, it talks about like why certain culture, like obviously Native people didn't have access to the same types of things that other cultures did. Right. Or same thing like if there are countries that were being exploited for their natural resources, they might not have been able to develop because all their shit was being robbed from them.
And actually, that's something I was listening to a lecture of somebody or other, and they actually talked about that being a major contributor to why Africa as a continent did not develop in the same way that a lot of Europe and whatnot, because the Atlantic slave trade and because people were pillaging the natural resources and just that kind of thing. Yeah. And so that's why all of Africa to this day.
Europeans got black powder and gunpowder from the Chinese. Yes. They traded with Asia. Yes. And they developed guns and they developed other types of weapons using gunpowder in China. Right. And the Europeans had diseases that when they traveled to places other people didn't have. So, I mean, most of the native people and indigenous people were wiped out through disease. They weren't even murdered directly. They were killed indirectly, not even on purpose. They were just accidentally killed because of the fact that they didn't know they were making people sick.
I don't know. Somebody. I was listening to somebody talking about it, and like something about journal entries of like people on
that was made up, by the way.
Oh, was?
So yeah. I know some people might disagree with me about this, but I'm like 99% sure on this. So there was something that was written like hundreds of years later, and somebody tried to say that certain things like that were done on purpose, but I'm not saying it didn't happen, but there's no real proof that anybody did that.
There's no direct evidence.
They also didn't understand disease very well.
No, they didn't.
So like, and also like the idea of smallpox blankets, you can't spread smallpox through blankets. That's medically impossible.
That I did not know.
So did people try to do it? Maybe. I don't know. There's no proof of it, but that was a story that was written later on.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm not trying to defend what Europeans did to
right. I mean,
people,
what they did was shitty.
But I also think
no matter
that
which way
it's dumb to just make shit up. Or,
I agree with that too.
Yeah, because I mean, like Columbus and the conquistadors did horrible shit.
Okay, and I do want to point this out, and if anybody argues with this, well, you're dumb. Christopher Columbus never came to the United States. Never stepped fucking foot on the United States. Not on the tip of fucking Florida. Not in North Carolina. And my favorite is when somebody said he came to Plymouth Rock. No, that is completely fucking wrong. I just want to point that out because somebody actually said it to me the other day. Like literally the other day.
Actually,
why do we celebrate Columbus Day if he never came to the United States? You're a fucking moron.
So,
sorry.
Actually, the disease thing, right?
Yeah, please.
You want to know one of the reasons why the Atlantic slave trade happened the way it did, and also why
it happened the way it did?
Yes. So just same as Europeans accidentally gave diseases to indigenous people. When Europeans started to go to Africa, they didn't go very far into anywhere inland. They went to the coast because they would get sick and they would die because the Europeans were getting infected by diseases from Africa,
like malaria.
Yeah, they would get because that they weren't used to being exposed to.
Right.
So that's the reason why when Europeans started to like try to colonize Africa and stuff, a lot of the stuff they did was along the coast, because they couldn't go inland because a lot of them would get sick and die.
Yeah, like Cape Verde, West Bank of Africa.
They would go there, and then they didn't go out and like capture people. They had other people bring people to them to buy them, and the reason they did that wasn't because it was probably easier to do it that way anyway, but they didn't want to go inland because they would trade stuff for people. Right. So I just think it's funny that.
Okay, I thought for a second there you were about to say that it was actually an accident. And
no. I was saying that that like
I was about to start writing an apology for that.
The Europeans didn't want to get sick.
Yeah.
By getting the diseases in Africa that they didn't have any immunity against.
Right.
And that the Europeans spread fucking diseases to the Americas.
Right.
Which whatever.
Okay.
I just thought there was a weird like.
No. I got you on that. Like I absolutely, that was probably part of it. No, it was a part of it. You're telling me that. So I think why don't we look at societies that are already doing that, like the different reservation, Native American indigenous people. Yes, actually, yes. Except for I know the Amish are not too keen or nice to people who have mental differences.
They're religious.
Yes,
too,
and
so
I don't dig that.
But I mean, as far as like they function.
Yeah, they do. And they are a commune-ish society.
I mean, they do sell and trade stuff, but they make all their own crap. They make their own clothes. They make their own houses.
Yeah. They take care of one another, except if you have a mental difference, from what I understand, you get an exorcism and kicked out or some shit. I don't know. Don't know completely, but everybody.
It's about that time.
Yes, it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, we really, 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 really want your feedback on this episode. Why? Because it's a thought experiment, and me and Steve, again, like I said at the beginning, do not presume to be experts. We
also probably offended somebody with my small,
and that's okay too. Thing. And actually, on that note, if you got offended by us saying Native American, which we also said indigenous, if you get upset because we called it that group of people, that I apologize. If you got offended by it, I'm not apologizing for saying it that way. But I am apologizing that you got offended by it because of this. Me and Steve are both on our own journey to learn things. And we are also growing and evolving ourselves. And we are trying, because we did start saying indigenous, right? Because when I was a kid, we didn't call them either one of them. We didn't call them Native American or indigenous. We called them the other term. But I've grown and learned. So we're still doing that process. But also, give us feedback of this episode. Tell us what you think about this idea of a commune. Do you think a commune would be a good idea for NDs? Do you think a ND-owned and operated business would be in our best bet? What do you think? Tell us. If you're the one person who's going to listen to this episode on Monday when Steve posts it, please give us feedback about this. Post it on our Facebook, post it on our Instagram. Tell us in our TikTok video that Steve's probably going to make about this. Write it right on Spotify. Please give us some feedback. Also, like, follow, share, whatever you want to do with all of our stuff.
So before I let everyone go, just a small thing.
Yes.
So I just looked up the smallpox thing.
Of course
Apparently,
you did.
I'm getting conflicting information from different sites. Some places said it did happen. Some places said it didn't. But they all say that there's no evidence that it actually worked. So they're saying that there's 2 instances of British people giving smallpox blankets to tribes.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that it worked according to it. Because as far as I know, I'm pretty sure I read years ago that you can't actually spread smallpox that way because of the way the virus would die before it would transfer to the other person. So I think you have to be like physical contact or like you have
human to human contact.
Yeah. Or like, I don't know if it spreads through the air, but either way, like it can't spread through cloth like that.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. So before someone gets mad at me,
yeah, where do you
I'm on Google.
Oh, passed out infection blankets. That word.
Says, this other one's from the University of Michigan says there's no evidence U.S. Army officers or
Please
doctors.
do not read that word.
What?
It's towards the end of the whole thing. Don't read that word.
Oh, yeah, but so I don't know. I could be wrong. I was just speaking out of my ass because it was something I read a long time ago that it.
Well, no,
I read that it didn't actually happen, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure I read that too. That even if they gave them the blankets, they wouldn't have known they had smallpox on them.
But I guess even the intent to do it is fucked up enough.
It is.
But most of the disease was spread unintentionally.
Right.
What my point was is that it wasn't like people were biological warfare. It was just people had fucking viruses and shit in them. And when you come into contact with a new group of people.
Yeah. Like if somebody had an influenza from Europe and came to the United States or whatever the fuck you want to call it at the time. Yeah. So give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. Give us ideas for future episodes. And also, if you'd like to be on this show, if you think you have an opinion, an idea, or something you'd like to talk about, reach out to us. Email us at info@onthespectrumpodcast.net. I went into that radio fucking thing again. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.